Hi, Maya, what's up?
Hi, Dhruv.
So I saw your note on the equalization levy. It's really an interesting one. Maybe would it be possible for you to first give an overview of what really the equalization levy is all about? Because although it was introduced in 2016, there seems to be a lot of confusion about who is the one who pays the equalization levy and how exactly the framework works.
Sure. So I think in 2016, the Indian government was trying to introduce a new tax, asserting their right to tax digital transactions, especially where they felt that companies who were situated abroad were not paying adequate taxes in India because of lack of physical presence here. So in 2016, the original equalization levy was introduced in the form of a withholding tax on an Indian taxpayer. And if the payment was above a certain sum for advertising services, then the Indian taxpayer was required to make a withholding on that particular outbound payment. In 2020, the new levy was brought in, which was Equalization Levy Part 2. It was an expansion of the previous kind of services that were covered. Pretty much all digital services were covered in the expansion last year. This was, however, introduced as a levy directly on the foreign operator and not as a withholding tax in the hands of the Indian payer. And in the recent budget, we have seen more amendments come through on that side, trying to clarify some of the issues that were raised in the past.
Right. That's fascinating because what happens if a person were to, let's say, fail to withhold tax in the original levy? Let's say there's a very large service provider, and that service provider simply says, sorry, I'm not going to pay withholding tax. You have to pay the full gross amount of the fees that was agreed upon, and I will not tolerate a withholding tax. What does a small customer of a very large online service provider do in this case?
That's a great question, bro, because in fact, in practice, many of the foreign companies did end up passing on the cost of the equalization levy to Indian companies. They basically grossed up the amount of consideration that was required to be paid to them. So contractually, it was possible for them to negotiate that the Indian company would pay a certain amount net of all taxes, including any additional equalization levy payments that maybe need to be made by them. And interestingly, if there was a non-withholding of equalization levy in the 2016 regime, it was the Indian company that would not get a deduction of that from its
Hmm.
profit for that particular year.
Okay, so there was a pretty high price for not withholding tax over there. But what is really interesting is that one hears a lot of people say that this is not covered by a tax treaty. Could you perhaps explain why this is not covered by a treaty? Because if a treaty were to be applicable, this tax would simply fail because the service provider is unlikely to have a permanent establishment in India.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Dhruv, because the whole point of introducing the equalization levy outside the Income Tax Act was in a way to make sure the tax treaty doesn't arguably apply to that tax. But however, the equalization levy and the nature of the levy was pretty highly debated, and I don't think there is a final resolution on that. There have been different views around it, saying it could be a service tax, it could be a transaction tax, it could be a tax on income because it is intended to be a tax on income. So is it a tax that is substantially similar to an income tax? All these questions, there are several arguments supporting each of these positions today, and there is no final position on any of this in any court of law, because different advisors take different views on this potentially. But for it to be covered under treaty, there are some ways in which it could possibly be covered under treaty, because it may qualify as a substantially similar tax to a income tax that has been levied in India. But at the same time, because of the way the 2016 levy, as we discussed, was you could pass it on like any other indirect tax to another party, it also kind of colors that distinction a little bit.
Fascinating. Well, moving on to the 2021 budget, could you perhaps guide us through some of the main key changes that have been made in this budget? Because one of the things is, of course, the exemption under Section 1050 has been expanded. But I also understand that whilst that is welcome, there are more teething troubles that one might expect to have with the 2021 bill as well.
Yes, Dhruv. So there were three changes that came through in the 2021 budget, and they were to some extent targeting certain issues raised by the industry over the course of the last year. Because when the EL was expanded in 2020, it came as a bit of a shock. It was surprise move that was brought in the last moment after the finance minister had completed the speech and the finance bill came out later. That's when the entire provision was there. So there was hardly much stakeholder consultations, and there were 2-3 issues that were specifically what the industry wanted clarity on. So the first one was whether a particular transaction would be covered under the equalization levy, or whether you have to pay 10% royalty on transaction under the Income Tax Act. And you would, of course, be tracking the case today in the Supreme Court, where this argument on whether a transaction is subject to royalty taxes or whether it is a digital service is still highly debated. So I think something that comes through on that end may actually help settle this dispute a little bit. But coming back to this point, I think the distinction between whether EL applies or royalty taxes would apply was only resolved from one perspective. The finance levy, then you don't have to pay anything under the Income Tax Act. So the amendment that they have brought in now says that if you are actually covered under the royalty regime, then you won't have to pay the equalization levy instead. So the government was possibly trying to fix an arbitrage opportunity for companies where they could have potentially paid the equalization levy at 2% and instead claimed an exemption from a 10% royalty tax. So that would not be possible anymore. But some of the open issues that still remain today is if, let's say, a company pays the equalization levy, nothing stops a tax officer to actually pay 10% on the same transaction as a royalty. Now, why that becomes a problem is the EL that has already been paid is not directly creditable against any royalty payment that may be due in the future. So any adverse ruling on that count may mean that companies will have to figure out a way to get the refund of the equalization levy many years after they have paid it. And they may also have to deal with paying interest or penalties potentially for non-payment of royalty at the right time. So these are issues which are still unresolved, and some clarity around this would be good.
So from what you're telling me, it appears that there is no clear guideline or a bright line test, as it were, about what transactions qualify as payments of royalties or fees for technical services and which transactions fall within the digital tax regime. They've only said that those that qualify for one would not be liable to another. Is that right?
Correct. That is what they have said currently, and more clarity may be available once the Supreme Court ruling is out with some guidance. But irrespective, I think any further guidance from the tax department in this regard would also help mitigate this concern.
So, Mayor, I also see that there is another amendment made to Section 164 where there is an explanation now which talks about online sale of goods and online provision of services, and that they include the following online activities, such as offer and acceptance of sale, placing purchase orders, acceptance of purchase orders, payment of consideration, sale of goods or provision of services partly or wholly. This seems to be an interesting formulation. Do you think this raises any new issues as well?
Yes, Dhruv. I think this again came past year, and it also brings with the change some additional confusion as to what is covered under some of the legs of the new clarification as well. So to give some context, when the provision was originally enacted last year, there were some questions raised as to what is covered, specifically with respect to offline services or offline supplies, which are partly online. So to give you an example, if you were to go to a booking platform and book a hotel service, right, would the underlying service being substantially an offline service through them because it's merely booked online? On what value would you have to pay the equalization levy? So would it be considered online provision of service, right? Or to give you another example, if somebody were to sell a book online, would the physical book being bought online be considered an online sale of a good? Because if you were to look at Sale of Goods Act, the sale could conclude at different points in time. It could be when the parties intend, but also typically the most common point in time when a sale concludes is when the physical goods are actually delivered. So at the point in time where a person is merely making an order online, is an online sale occurring was a gray area. So in this context, I think this is how we should understand the clarifications that have come through, where the government has now said that even if an offer or an acceptance or a placing of an order is conducted online, they're deeming that to qualify as an online sale of a good or an online provision of services for the requirements of equalization levy. Where it goes quite wider and possibly creates more issue is with respect to the provision on any transaction that is partly undertaken online being covered. Now, to give you an example, why this may cover situations previously not thought about is, let's take a service where somebody does an underwriting service. You want to go to a concert, you book a ticket, and they say that for some reason, if it's cancelled, they will refund the money to you. Now, this is not a typically digital service. This is not an online service. This is not the target of what the entire global discussions are currently about, right? But if to help you make that claim for that refund, they say, send me an email, send me a WhatsApp message, or send me, upload a few documents on this portal that I have created for this purpose. Are we today saying then that the equalization potentially applies to this transaction? Those are the kind of questions that are, being raised considering the wide language that are used with the new amendment. And even with mere payments being covered, if for a purely offline transaction, if you're making a payment through an online portal or a gateway, it's an address then should also be paying equalization levy merely because they are enabling online payments. And this goes contrary to the government's view to deepen the online payment network and encourage online payments at a policy level.
Another major, seemingly major introduction of a definition, which almost looks like a deeming fiction really, is that of a consideration received or receivable from e-commerce supply or services, which have been deemed to include consideration for sale of goods, irrespective of whether the e-commerce operator owns the goods, and consideration for provision of services, irrespective of whether the service is provided or facilitated by the e-commerce supplier. This appears to be a rather broad definition and therefore a deeming fiction, where it seems likely that it would create a tax liability on an e-commerce operator, even though it might be selling third-party goods or providing third-party services through the platform. Do you have any comment about that?
Sure, Dhruv. I think this is one of the more potentially impactful amendments that's come through. This was also partly because of an issue flagged by the industry around why some of the provisions of the equalization levy were vague when they were passed last year. So the context to this is that if there is a marketplace and that's enabling sales of a third party, typically they would be charging a commission for any sales that they facilitate, either of goods or other services. Now, because of the wordings of the previous provision, which was any consideration received from the facilitation of any such services or from the facilitation of goods, it was unclear what the base would be. So to give you an example, if a platform were to enable a sale of 100 rupees worth value of goods, and it charges a 5% commission, right? So whether it would have to pay EL on the 5 rupees or the entire 100 was not entirely clear before this amendment came through. And depending on the structure of the operations in the back end, certain platforms sometimes may choose to collect the money in their own account, deduct the commission due to them, and then pass on the payment, in which case the consideration that they receive from a supply, irrespective of whether it's on their own behalf or on behalf of a third party, would have been quite clear that, arguably it's the 100 and that's what they have to deduct on. And automatically that meant effectively that you're getting the marketplaces to not only pay taxes on their own income, but effectively they are basically collecting and paying taxes on behalf of a third party seller. Now, what this amendment does is, even in situations where, let's take a marketplace where the buyer directly pays the seller through gateway, right? And the seller, once they receive the money, they then pay the marketplace the commission of 5 rupees. In which case the marketplace doesn't receive, or even if it were to be deemed to receiving any money in the original circumstance, it was only the 5 rupees commission that they were receiving from any sort of facilitation. Now, in that case, the net income would have only been offered to tax under the EL. But this deeming fiction makes it clear that irrespective of how you are structured in the backend, irrespective of how the money flows through the system, the marketplace will have to deduct on the entire gross amount. The other additional problem that comes of the way this wording of this provision is, the amendment has been made, is that it puts in a deeming fiction for the term consideration received. Now, if we were to take example communication platforms, right, and where people are able to interact and chat with each other, and going back to the previous amendment we discussed, where anything that is conducted online would be considered as facilitation of a sale, online sale or an online service. So if I were to chat with you over email or a texting platform, and I say, I'm going to sell you something and you accept it, does that mean then, although that particular platform as a communication platform is not set up for facilitating sales, considering the wide definitions that have been included, it is an open question now whether, irrespective of receiving any form of consideration for the communication service, whether the value of the underlying service would be deemed to be consideration received by that particular form, right? Situations where payments go through third-party payment gateways and not through the marketplace. In terms of whether this applies or not is again another gray area which the provision doesn't clearly answer. And there is also the arguments around impossibility and whether certain provisions can actually be fastened on parties if they are not reasonably you can expect a party to reasonably comply with it. So in a communication platform, it's difficult to expect an operator to expect to know what sort of communications happen, what transactions happen or not, considering most of these are offline transactions in any case. It's only a small portion that happens online. So these are significant issues that still remain unresolved with the new amendment, and these are actually brought about because of the way the new amendments are worded. So while the intent is quite clear that they wanted to clarify the industry ask and say that this is going to be on a gross basis, I think it potentially goes much further to say that even marketplaces or communication platforms which don't charge any consideration whatsoever will still have to withhold taxes on behalf of a third-party seller, which is quite large in its scope. Yeah.